This is Isaiah chapter 10 and verse 7. But the king of Assyria will not understand that he is my tool. His mind does not work that way. His plan is simply to destroy, to cut down nation after nation. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. All right, I want to go into a lesson, Lord willing, entitled World War III and Prophecy, the Third Rome Theory. All right, and the reason I'm starting off with this precept, all right, because the king of Assyria really going into Esau, Edom, all right, beginning with the elites, all right, and dealing with the West. They really don't understand that ultimately the Lord is using them as a tool, all right, to bring about this judgment. All right, let's go here. This is Revelation chapter 20 and 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. All right, so we see that the Lord has used the so-called white man, which is the spiritual counterpart. I mean, the human counterpart, the physical counterpart of the spiritual demon Satan. All right, the so-called white man has deceived the nations and ultimately pushed the world to the brink of war. All right, and we know according to prophecy, war will play out. All right, and you see how it ends, right? It says, which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle. All right, so the deception that was pushed out in the West, all right, because you have to keep in mind, Gog and Magog is a reference to Russia. They now occupy the lands that were inherited by Japheth. All right, so these are the biblical names of that landmass that Russia is currently placed in. All right, so this is a reference to the Edomites that dwell in the land of Gog, if you can understand it. All right, the Russians, the Americans, the British, the Israelis, they're all a part of the same nation. They're all a part of Edom. Yet they are divided. All right. And as we can see, according to this prophecy, the deception would go forth to the four corners of the earth. And ultimately, it would be used to gather the world into this battle. All right. Now, going back to the topic of the lesson, the third Rome theory. All right. It's inspired by an excerpt from this recent video from Predictive History, Game Theory 18, Trump World Order. All right, so I'm going to play a few minutes of this clip here. All right, and then Lord willing, we'll go into the third Rome theory.
And Russia is preparing to fight a long, long war. Now, not only can Russia produce its own drones for the war, but it can also export its drones to Iran to fight against the Americans. Okay? And so you're like, wait a minute here. So Russia is switching its entire economy to war production, which means that Russia will always fight wars. Is that what Russia's planning? And the answer is yes, it is. Okay? And so let me explain why Russia is planning this. This is something called the Third Rome Plan. Okay? And this comes from the 1996 book, Foundations of Geopolitics, okay, by Alexander Dugin, who I think is one of the smartest geopolitical thinkers alive today, okay? And his argument is this. His argument is this unipolar moment of American dominance, it's going to fade away because it's too much focus on secularism, individualism, liberalism. And these ideas break apart community. These ideas are anti-human. So eventually, Western society, Western civilization will collapse because its values are abhorrent. And when it collapses, this gives opportunity for Moscow to become the third Rome, okay? We'll talk more about this in the future. But what's brilliant about Dugin is he recognizes that when the world collapses, all Russia has to do is stay stable and resilient. As long as it stays together, unified, cohesive, it'll be fine. Okay? Because as this global order collapses, as the global economy collapses, every other society will face eternal collapse, such as the United States. Okay?
All right, so I wanted to let that play out to kind of give you an overview of the mentality behind the third Rome plan. You know, I call it the third Rome theory because, again, it's not going to play out according to their will either. All right, this is Job chapter 12 and verse 16. With him is strength and wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his. All right, and what you notice is all of the major players, all right, that are heading into this third world woe have an eschatology or a belief system that is driving them to the war of Armageddon, all right, into the valley of Yahweh Shaphat. All of these nations have a belief system, a theory, a belief system that is leading them to this area. All right. And what's not well known is that Russia has its own eschatology. All right. And for those who don't know, eschatology is the theological study of last things, encompassing the end of individual human life, the culmination of history, and the final destiny of humanity. All right. So eschatology is basically the study of the end times. Okay. And all of the nations have their own version of what's going to happen in the end times with them coming out on top. All right. And what I mean by that is they all believe that there's going to be a war at the end of days. They all agree on that. But their belief system leads them to believe that they're going to come out on top. And that's why, again, Job chapter 12 and verse 16, with him is strength and wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his. All right. And we talk about Russia often. And oftentimes, you know, they're not talked about in a bad light as bad as America. But again, they are Edomites. All right, make no mistake about it. All right, the world speaks highly of the Russians because they aren't as um they haven't been as wicked to the other nations as America, but they're all Edomites. They all play by the same rules. This is why Russia is being presented as a better option, but they're still Edomites. But they also have a belief system that at the end of days, at the end of this conflict, they'll come out on top. And we heard Professor Jing go over it as a overview. But what we'll do through the spirit is we'll actually go into and examine the third Rome theory to see and show really that this is just another leg of Esau. All right. The Russians are no different than the Americans as far as their nation. They're all Edomites. And their mentality, even think about that, them aspiring to have the third Rome. Who was Rome ruled by? It was ruled by Edomites. And when you really deal with their belief system, is that the Byzantine Empire, you know, was in Russia and it fell. And their belief is that they'll revive it. So this is why you see the third Rome. All right, so let's go here to Wikipedia. All right, it says Moscow, third Rome. All right, Moscow, third Rome is a theological and political concept asserting Moscow as the successor to ancient Rome, carrying forward the legacy of the Roman Empire. The term Third Rome refers to a historical topic of debate in European culture originating in the Eastern Orthodox circles. The question of the successor city to the first Rome, all right, and the second Rome, Constantinople, going into the Byzantine, the Ottoman Empire, likewise claimed to be the true successors of the Roman Empire after their conquest of Constantinople. All right, so this is a theory that they're a continuation of Rome. All right, now, as a caveat, All right. When you deal with Revelation, the 13th chapter, all right. As a matter of fact, let's go to it. This is Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. It says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having seven heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the names of blasphemy." You have to keep in mind that Russia is not involved in this beast system. This beast system consists of NATO going into the 7 heads and the EU going into the 10 horns. Now, of course, in 2026, there are many members of the EU and of NATO, but this is a representation of that system. All right. And the woman that sitteth on that beast, all right, this is Revelation chapter 17, and I'll jump down to verse 3. "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." All right. So that woman is America. All right. To support that point, this is Revelation 17 and 18. "And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth." All right. And I'm bringing this out to show that even though the Russian Edomites believe that they're the last leg of Rome, they're the revived Roman Empire. When you actually deal with Revelation, the 17th chapter and the 13th chapter, all right, the world wandering after the beast, that beast is the NATO EU system with America at the forefront as that woman that sitteth on top of the beast. And the reason I'm bringing this out is because, again, as the scriptures say, the deceived and the deceiver are his. And what you notice is that the Russian Edomites have the same aspiration as the Western Edomites. All right, the Americans, the British, the German, all of those Edomites, they all have this dream of reviving the Roman Empire, the glory of Rome. All right, which represents, the glory of Edom, if you really want to be frank about it. You know, that's why even now, the American system, celebrates Rome, all right, through the architecture, through the Latin language, so on and so forth. All right, because again, that was a Edomite empire. And that's why even if we're talking about Russia, all right, even though they're going against America, the aspiration of reviving Rome is something they all share, they all have in common, showing you that it's the same family. All right, real quick. It's Matthew 12 and 26. All right, we're going to go back to the KJV. Matthew 12, let's start at 25. It says, "And Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand?" And if you consider that the first 2 world wars were fought by Edomites on both sides of the war, with other nations playing a supporting role, you'll see that the house of the so-called white man has been divided since they received the power, since the world was given into their hands. All right, Job 9 and 24. "The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he?" All right, and for those who don't know, the wicked is the so-called white man as a nation of people. Whether they call themselves Russian, German, American, British, Australian, Canadian, their biblical nationality is Edom, and they are considered the wicked. And this is important to understand because when you do consider this through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai, the world makes more sense. Because what you have is Edomites in the east fighting Edomites in the west. And that's going to ultimately bring about the Third World War, which was prophesied to occur. All right, this is Revelation chapter 11 and verse 14. The second war is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And the first and second world wars were basically Edomite on Edomite violence. All right, you deal with World War II, the Germans against the Allies, all right, which is basically the Germans and their axis of resistance against the Allies. Two Edomite countries with all the other nations being dragged into the war. We deal with World War One. All right, the Germans also. All right, going against the you can, I guess you can call them the Allies. So what we've seen again is Edomite on Edomite conflict termed as world wars. And where we're headed is another Edomite on Edomite conflict. All right. And when you consider that the Lord gave them a delusion of believing that they could create a third Rome through the destruction that's about to happen, it shows you that the Lord is in full control of both sides, good and evil, even both sides of this war. All right. Real quick. This is Proverbs chapter 21 and 1. It says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. All right. And when you deal with the third Rome theory, all right, he mentioned the guy's name. All right. The guy's name is Alexander Dugin. All right. And if we look at who this guy is, he's a Russian philosopher. All right. So it's Alexander Dugin. All right. It says a Russian philosopher who is the leading theorist of Russian neo-Eurasianism. All right. So they're basically having this belief that they hold the traditions, the ancient traditions, the traditional idea of what the Edomites had at one point. And they believe it's their duty to revive Edomite supremacy, you know, and they may not put it that way, but when you picture yourself as reviving the third Rome, it's basically they're saying that they should be in the power seat. They should be the new HNIC over Edomite supremacy. All right. And Alexander the Dugin is closely associated with Putin. All right. It's not like they're best friends or anything, but his philosophy is extremely popular in Russia. And again, this is all going to lead to the third world's woe. And when I saw this in this clip, I wanted to bring it out through the spirit because, again, it shows you that even though they're in Russia, these are still Edomites, which is why they glorify Rome and they believe that they're the third, they're going to be the third Rome. They're going to be responsible for bringing Rome back to the forefront, so to speak. All right, let's go back to Wikipedia. All right, it says Moscow, third Rome. Now I want to jump down to this. All right, it says end of the 15th century. It says at the end of the 15th century, the emergence of the idea that Moscow is truly a new Rome can be found. The whole idea of Moscow as third Rome could be traced as early as 1492. Think about that, right? Because 1492, you get Columbus. All right, you get the fall of Granada, dealing with the Moors. All right, really marking Jake really falling from grace, and then the revived Roman Empire. This is why 1492 in that era is known as the Renaissance, the rebirth. So this idea that the East, all right, or Moscow would be responsible for the true rebirth of Rome went all the way back to when they started holding power, when they started to be revived again. All right, because we just read it in Revelation 20th chapter. All right, let's go to it. Revelation 20 and 7, it says, and when 1,000 years are expired. All right, so when did the 1,000 years expire? All right, contrary to what Christianity pushes, this has already happened. And the 1,000 years expired going into 1492. All right, when you had the Renaissance period. And that's no coincidence that the Renaissance period is known as the rebirth. All right, as a matter of fact, let's go here and tie it all together. All right, Renaissance, the definition of it, Renaissance French for rebirth. All right, so Rome went down. All right, you had a so called Dark Ages where so called Negroes had rulership and dominion. All right. And then the Dark Ages came to an end, and you had what is known as the Renaissance or rebirth in 1492. So if you look at this theory of Third Rome, it's not a new theory. It came out during the Renaissance period. All right, so let's read this again. It says the whole idea of Moscow as Third Rome could be traced as early as 1492, when Metropolitan of Moscow, Zosimus, expressed it. Metropolitan Zosimus, in a foreword to his work of 1492, presentation of the Pashalion, Russian, quite clearly expressed it, calling Ivan III the new Tsar Constantine of the new city of Constantine, Moscow. This idea is best known in the presentation of the monk Philotheus of the early 16th century. So now, pious king, that all the Christian kingdoms came to an end and came together in a single kingdom of yours. Two Romes have fallen, the third stands, and there will be no fourth. No one shall replace your Christian czardom, according to the great theologian. All right, and they're even quoting scriptures. All right, so man, call Allah Shah. Because what you see, right, is even when you deal with the Iranians, the Elamites, and their Shia form of Islam, it is an eschatology that pushes them towards this war as well, with their belief system that they'll come out on top. All of these nations that are getting involved in this war, all these major players have a belief system attached to it that tells them in their mind they'll come out on top in this war. And the Lord is using that, among many other things, to gather them into that valley of Yahweh Shaphat, which means Yahweh's judgment. It's Joel chapter 3 and verse 1. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, all right, going into the southern and the northern kingdom, Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. So seeing this war and the tension in the earth increase is a sign that the Lord is bringing back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. All right. And to bring again doesn't mean that we got to go back into captivity. It means that the Lord's going to loose us from captivity. All right. As a matter of fact, let's go here. All right. NLT says at the time of those events, says the Lord, when I restore the prosperity of Judah and Jerusalem. All right. Look at NKJV. For behold, in those days and at that time when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem. So this doesn't mean that the nation of Israel is going back into captivity. It means the opposite. So when you see this war and rumors of wars increase in the earth, understand that it's the same time the Lord said that it would no longer be said, the Lord liveth that delivered the children of Israel out of Egypt. But the Lord liveth that delivered the children of Israel out of the land of the north, and everywhere we're scattered. Because we're not just in Babylon the Great, which is America. We're scattered to the four winds of the earth, to the four corners of the earth. So seeing this war increase is a sign that the Lord is about to rescue the nation of Israel, beginning with the elect. So for the rest of the world, this is bad news. But for the Israelites, beginning with the elect, this is great news. All right, verse 2 reads, I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Yahweh Shaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. All right. And the Lord is using these different belief systems that all of these nations have to justify and even inspire them to go into this battle. All right, because for a long time I did not know about the third Rome theory. I found out about it a few weeks ago. And the Spirit of the Lord had it brought back to my memory to do this lesson. But again, it shows you that rather it's the Iranians, all right, which are the Elamites, and their belief system is Shia Islam, which promotes martyrdom, you know, and their belief system that they're on the right side of history. That in the end days, the 12th, I believe they call it the 12th Mahdi will come back. And they believe that the Messiah will come back. And they even reference the Messiah and they call him Jesus, Isa, which is a play on Jesus, but they believe the Messiah will come back at the end of this, during the war, at the end of days, and he'll save them. So all of these nations have a belief system, all right, that promotes them going into this fight. All right. So let's go back to, where did I leave off at? All right, so let's go back to Wikipedia. Before I do that, let's continue in Joel 3. All right, because I wanted to get this. It says, I will bring them down. All right, when you go into this word, Hebrew word for bring them down is your rod. All right, it says to go down, descend, decline, march down, sink down, to go or come down, to sink, to be prostrated, to come down, to bring down, to send down, to take down, to lay prostrate, to let down, to be brought down, to be taken down. All right. And when we go into Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, all right, verse 1 reads, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I'm against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. All right, so even though these Russians have this mentality that they're on the right side of history, all right, and they're the good guys in this equation, all right, the Lord is saying, I'm against thee. Why? Because they're all Edomites at the end of the day. They're a more traditional Edomite, if you want to call it that, but they're all Edomites at the end of the day. And the Lord is referencing and saying, look, even though I'm using you for a certain purpose, I'm still against you as well. Verse 4 reads, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. All right. And that's bringing them back into that cold war, Soviet Union spirit. And what you find out is when you look at the Moscow Third Rome theory, it's always been around. So even during the Soviet Union days, they had this belief system that they were going to be on top, that they were the rightful next leg of Rome, so to speak. All right, Ezekiel 38:4 reads again, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth in all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great army, so like even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. And keep in mind, this will play out. All right. And this is a reference to Turkey. All right. Turkey basically siding with Russia and their team, if you will, their confederate, and going against Babylon the Great, which is America. All right. Verse 7 reads, Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. So the Lord has given the Russians a belief system that pushes them towards prophecy. That's why the Lord said the deceived and the deceiver are his. No one can no one can resist the will of the Heavenly Father. And the Lord has given all of these nations a belief system that justifies them fulfilling prophecy. So much so that even though they're being told this, they're not going to upset prophecy, which really shows you the power of the Heavenly Father. So I found this through the Spirit, and I want to bring it out I wanted to bring it out a couple weeks ago, but the thought slipped my mind through the spirit, and it was brought back today on my way home. So I wanted to bring this out through the spirit. Lord willing, this was edifying with that. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwad, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.